Setbacks are temporary, but comebacks, they are legendary. Welcome back to the PSI Effect, where we pause, shift, and ignite purpose that speaks louder than your past. This is Neug, and together with Franky, we're your hosts in this space, and your comeback starts now. Welcome back to the PSI Effect Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about comebacks when you're the only audience, right? The only audience is you. That's going to be our topic today. But before we get started with that, Franky, how you doing there, brother?
What's up, Neug? Things going well. Been a productive week. Just trying to make sure that, we're keeping things in the road, so to speak. A little bit of an experiment today. I'm in a space that I call the lab, where we're doing the recording today. And this is kind of the spot where I go, when I need to focus, when I need to kind of get some space where it's just me. So, even though I didn't intend it, I think it might be appropriate that I'm in this space as we're talking about this topic today, because this is like my little secret digital closet where I like to hide out when I need to work on those things, or when I need some privacy and some me time.
Fantastic. Yeah, that background looks really cool, man. Looks like you might have a little fun up there, more fun than actual working.
Well, yeah, that might be debatable depending on what's going on. But, I think there should be a healthy balance of the work and the fun. If you're going to work hard, you got to play hard too.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's just jump in. So, as we talked about, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about, comebacks, the ones where, nobody's looking. So we're going to be pulling the curtain back on those comebacks and, talking about those comebacks that just involve, well, I shouldn't say just involve you, but that, you're the closest audience to what's going on. Right. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about, comebacks that nobody sees, right? So we're not talking about the grandiose comebacks like the Hollywood style, flashy lights and firework type comebacks. We're talking about real comebacks that where you're the only audience of that particular comeback. And so as we get into that, Franky, why don't you talk a little bit about what comeback actually means?
Man, when I'm thinking about comebacks, the visualization I always see for myself is kind of goes into the athletics realm, specifically like boxing or mixed martial arts, where, somebody gets knocked to the canvas and they have to get back up to keep going. When I think about the things that I've gone through and the times that I've had setbacks, many times that's what it felt like. Physically that wasn't the case. But that's what it felt like. I got knocked down by something. I may have gotten blindsided by something, and it set my butt down on the canvas. And I had to find a way to get up, face that thing, and then keep on going. So, the comeback is more than just a bounce back. And I think that's something that we really need to, dig into. So, Neug, when I say the word bounce back, what does that bring to mind for you?
Well, bouncing back to me is just getting back to a point of where you were, right? So, for instance, let's say you're an accountant. I don't know why I picked accountant, but let's just say you're an accountant and you lose your job, right? And then you get another job, but it's the same type of job, same type of position, same level, same pay, right? You just went from one accounting role to a different accounting role, but you didn't lose any ground, you didn't gain any ground. So to me, that's kind of a bounce back kind of a situation.
Okay. So bounce back, there's a fall, there's a stumble, however you want to characterize it, but you get back to where you were. So exactly. I think it's okay. So I think that's really important, because when we look at that and comparing to what we call a comeback, there's a distinct difference, because, as we're talking about pausing and shifting and igniting, that shift takes us to a new place. So it seems as though a comeback is going to not only stand us back up to where we were, but give us a step into something new, a transformation into a new state. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, because in the same, accountant scenario, so, let's say you lost that job and you get a different one, but this one elevates you a step or two above where you were. I mean, so there's that recovery, that bounce back, that recovery, and then that growth into a new role. So it's not only an external um tangible growth spurt, if you will, where you're elevated to a different position, but then there's a stretch possibly for you as an individual as to how you're going to assimilate with that role and manage yourself and possibly others in that role. So there's a growth or a transformation type of phase for that could happen with that as well.
Yeah, and I think a good way to sum it up to make sure that it can stick with our listeners is that a bounce back just gets you back to where you were. It's a state that you knew already. It's something that you had already attained. But in the sense of a comeback, as we talk about it, that comeback is going to take you somewhere new. So you're going to reclaim and extend beyond.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That is 100% correct. I was thinking about you were using that boxing analogy earlier when it comes to setbacks, and my mind quickly went to Muhammad Ali and his statement about float like a butterfly, sting like a bee,
Yeah.
and that's really what those setbacks can be. They can just come and sting you right quick. It was just kind of something funny that was in my head.
Hey, the champ is here.
The champ, right? And
Yes.
talk about comeback stories. Well, let's when we talk about um comebacks, we can't really talk about that without talking about something real and personal and raw for ourselves. And so I'll just share a quick story. um I don't profess to be a expert at any of the things that we talk about. Certainly I'm not a a licensed therapist or anything, but I can just talk about what has happened in my life. And so, there was a period of time in my life where I got a job in a faraway place where I didn't know anyone. And I think I shared a story like this before. But at this particular time, I had, some some financial issues. And so my credit score sucked. Like it was just awful. Mm. Excuse me. So, when I moved to this place and I was moving here to be a manager in this organization to lead people and be possibly be a role model, if you will. And so I moved there and I didn't have a vehicle. And so I had to purposely find somewhere to live in this town on a bus line so that I could ride the bus to work. And I don't know if people, my managers, my leaders, or the folks that I led at the time really cared much about that situation. But for me, it was kind of embarrassing, and I felt vulnerable at that point because here I was, this manager who was supposed to be this mentor, this leader, and here I was, I just felt like I didn't have my act together. And so, I'm riding the bus to work and riding the bus home and rain or shine or whatever. And that went on for a while. And so in my mind, I had made a decision that I was going to get a vehicle. But I was also determined that I was going to purchase this vehicle on my own. I was not going to have a co-signer to help me with this, this accomplishment or this comeback that I was working toward. And so fast forward, over time, I met a guy, befriended a guy who very, very funny, very smart guy. I'll never forget this guy. Everybody called him Motz. His name was Jeff Motzer.
Hmm.
Very good friend of mine. And so he knew someone who worked at a car dealership who was a sales manager who, he put me in touch with, and we were able to make a deal, and I was able to get a vehicle. Um, And so I was really excited about that. It was a comeback for me. It was a brand new vehicle. Um, I can't remember what the interest rate was on that vehicle, but I can tell you that it was not 0%. Let's just say that. But it was a comeback, and it just catapulted me, you know, uh, to the future. And so, it was a very dark time for me initially because, like I said, it was embarrassing. And in hindsight, it was probably just embarrassing for me. I don't think other people really, cared. I think they were just judging me on my performance, what I was doing there, and that turned out fine. Yeah. So I mean, that's one of my personal comeback stories, and no one really knew on the outside, they saw that I didn't have a vehicle, and then they saw that I did have a vehicle. On the inside is what they didn't see. It was just personal, um, that personal stuff that I just had to get over. And eventually I did. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great story to share too, Nuge. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is, you were describing how you were feeling. And one of the words that you just used was, you were embarrassed. And I wonder, how much does that type of feeling play into our decision on whether we will, bring others into our comeback versus trying to handle it on our own? And looking at it through that lens, it brought to mind a story for me. And for me, going through it by myself was strictly based in embarrassment because I was embarrassed about the situation. So years ago, for a short stint, I was a smoker. I smoked cigarettes, um, infrequently, but still enough to be classified as habitual. And I hid that. Nobody really knew. I would smoke in the car. If I was at work, I would kind of, get missing and go somewhere and smoke. So it wasn't like I was smoking in front of people and things like that. But it was something that I was embarrassed about because I knew it was a bad habit. There's so much data that says how much of a bad decision that is to smoke cigarettes. And I decided that, all right, when we found out that we were pregnant with our first child, it's like, okay, this is something that's got to go. I can't keep, doing this. I can't keep sneaking and smoking and things like that. And I kept it to myself largely because I was embarrassed. I thought I was a smart person, should have sense enough to know better and things like that. But I kept it to myself, and thankfully I was able to go ahead and break through and just, walk away from that bad habit. But that feeling inside was one of the things that contributed to my decision to kind of keep that comeback to myself.
Yeah. Something sticks out to me what you said there about, uh, you were smoking enough to where it was habitual, but you made a decision that you needed to, uh, you know, kick that habit, if you will. And I just want to, just take a moment at this point. We've talked about folks getting help in the past, and sometimes you're in a situation where you can't do it yourself, right? Addiction is real, and smoking is an addiction. And so I just want to point out to our audience that if you're in a situation, like Frankie described, or some other situation where you're fighting an addiction, don't be afraid to reach out for help, because there's a lot of help. There's a lot of help available. Just reach out and do a little research. The internet is there not only for some of the crazy stuff that we see in the world and in the news today, but it can also be a tool to help um, you know find things that can really make a positive impact in your life. So don't be afraid to reach out. So I just wanted to take that moment to mention that to our audience, Frankie.
Yeah. I mean, there's no better way to say it. Sometimes we can't do it by ourselves. And there is nothing wrong with asking for help.
So as we talk about, as we reflect on those stories, was it harder to act or believe it mattered without applause?
I mean, when we look at things through the lens of, the PSI framework, when we pause and we shift and ignite, the pause and the shift, is where we take that time to try to get our mind in order. To me, it seems like the hardest part was actually where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, where it's time to actually start doing. We've thought about it, we've made a plan, and it's all well and great, and we've said it before, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. But, when you have to translate that plan into action, that's always seems to be the hardest part for me, because it's all well and good to talk about it and think about it. It's a lot tougher to do it. It's just like that old saying from the schoolyard back in the day: don't talk about it, be about
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Lessons learned back in the day like that, man, I tell you.
it. And I don't know if the kids get those types of lessons anymore, but it's a whole new world for them out there that I wouldn't be able to function in. So I don't want to diminish what it is that they go through today, but there's some lessons that we learned that they're not learning in the same fashion.
Yeah, let me just say that the title of that football show, was it called Hard Knocks?
Hmm.
That means something from way back.
Yes.
So let's do a shift here and talk about some funny comebacks. I'll go first.
Boy,
It's
you
funny
let
now. It was not it was not funny then. So uh I'm sure our audience doesn't know that I am a veteran. And so I remember basic training, my very first night in basic training. And I'm sure a lot of veterans have nightmare stories of their first nights in basic training. But anyway, so we get to mm, the barracks where we're going to be. And of course, the drill sergeants go through their whole stories about, the rules and blah, 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 all this stuff, right? So one of the things that the drill sergeant said was, when I say lights out, I mean lights out. These lights do not come back on. Okay. I mean, that was simple enough, right? So they had what they called fire guard. And so every night, a group of us would be assigned fire guard, and you go in shifts, right? And so you have to walk the barracks and make sure nobody was smoking, and, make sure that everything was kosher overnight. And so who drew fire guard on the first night? That would be me. And so along with that, you have to go down to headquarters, and the duty sergeant had to give you instructions, and he inspected you and made sure that you were in uniform correctly and so forth. And when I was in basic training, I had started growing a little beard, right? And this drill sergeant gets in front of me and he goes, "Son, you're gonna go back and you're gonna shave that stuff off your face." And let me just tell you, he didn't use the word stuff, he used a different word.
right.
And so I'm like, okay. And when they talk to you, they're right in your face. Like they are in your face, like right. Bad breath and all. Doesn't matter what they were eating. This is just awful. So, okay, I'm good. I go back, Now I've never used a razor in my life, first and foremost. Let me just say that. So I go back to the barracks, and at that point, lights are out. So I gotta find my locker and try to get in my locker and find my razor and shaving cream, this task that I've never done before. And guess what? The lock on my locker is a combination lock. I don't know how many people can open a combination lock in the dark. And I
Mm.
had no flashlight, and I was not a smoker. I had no lighter. And so I flipped on the light, got my razor. Before I could close my locker door, Drill Sergeant Kirby was in my face. And when I tell you, he was like the biggest man I had ever seen in my life. Like my dad was like 6'2". Growing up, he was a giant. I'm an adult male, okay, 17, 18. This guy was the biggest man I had ever seen. And I don't mean fat, I mean stocky, muscular. He gets in my face. Rainy, when I say lights out, I mean lights out. And I mean, he just dressed me down, standing right there, man. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this dude wants me to shave, and this dude wants me to keep the lights out, and okay, like I'm just in this quandary. So anyway, go through that, turn the lights off. I shave. I have to go
In
back to
in
the
the
duty
dark,
sergeant.
you shave in the dark.
No, it's in the bathroom. They have, kind of like night lights that, they have dim light in the bathroom. And so I was able to shave. So I go back to this duty sergeant, And man, I'm just bleed. I done nicked myself all. I'm just bleeding everywhere, right? Can't even stop the blood. And I go back, and this guy looks at me and he goes, "Well, trainee, that's more like it." I tell you what, man, that was just hilarious to me. But the comeback in that was I just had to realize what these guys were doing, and I had to go back to, what I knew about myself. They just beat me down. That was just a rough night, man. They just beat me down. But I had to climb back up, right? Because I learned at that point in time that there were probably going to be many situations that I might experience like that in basic training. And so I had to come to grips with the fact that, that was going to be a thing. But man, I tell you, at that point in time, it was not funny at all. I was actually pissed. And you can imagine a young man, 17, 18 years old, full of piss and vinegar. I wanted to, say some things and do some things, but,
Yeah.
I had to show restraint. So, yeah. So that's my funny mini comeback story. And I say mini because it was kind of an overnight thing. I had to, like recover overnight.
Oh gosh, and you got blood dripping down your face. I can only imagine what
Oh,
you look like coming back from that experience,
oh,
getting dressed down by the drill sergeant. You're bleeding, and then you got to come back and stay up for your your fire duty shift.
man,
Okay,
crazy.
but you grew from
Yep.
that, though, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, I tell you what, there are some guys I met in basic training who just didn't grasp the concept of what was happening. So fortunately I did, and I grew past that. So, talk about an unglamorous story, but it was powerful. Like you said, I did grow. So it turned out really well. Yeah, so hopefully that story, Frankie, shows how unglamorous that some comebacks can be, but also how powerful that they can be, right? Comebacks can be very powerful. And then, like when you break it down, there's an actual rhythm to the comeback, the pause, the shift, the ignite. I mean, things you mentioned earlier, and we were talking that you had your boxing analogy, right? You get knocked down, but then you pause and you make a shift and you ignite. You get back up, and you keep moving, right? This rhythm just happens throughout life. It makes me think about waves of the ocean, right? So they roll back, which is kind of the pause, right? And then they shift, they gain momentum, and they rush back to the shore, right? Which is the ignition part. So it's a rhythm that happens, and you can think of many analogies to go with it, but it's something that happens, time and time again. And I guess the question is, how do you deal with it, each and every time? Um, so let's move on to our next piece where we talk about the connection with the PSI steps. Frankie, why don't you take us through some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've put together this framework. I alluded to it before, where we pause, we shift, we ignite, we take we pause to take stock of where we are, we shift our mindset, we make a decision that we want something new, and then we have to go execute. And sometimes that can be hard, and for different people, different steps of that framework can be difficult. I mentioned before that step from shift to ignite is difficult for me because that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where we actually have to start doing. If we take it back to that analogy that we've been kind of going back and forth with the boxing analogy, it's like, all right, you get knocked down, you're on the canvas. So you pause to gather yourself, you get back up, you make that decision that you're going to get back up and continue fighting. But then you actually have to keep fighting. This person that just fed you that knuckle sandwich and knocked you to the ground is still standing in front of you, ready and willing to do it again. But you have to be brave enough to step forward and keep fighting the fight. I think there's an analogy there for how we're dealing with our setbacks in day-to-day life. Something's going to sit us down. We got to stand back up and we got to go back in there to keep on fighting. And that's not easy.
That's not easy. And, I think about the pause stage can be difficult too. And I agree with you that each step in its own right can be difficult depending on the situation, depending on the person. And, I think the pause can be difficult sometimes because I think inherently we just when things go wrong, we want to fix it, right? We just want to fix it and we want to move on. But if we don't take the time to set the stage on what needs to be fixed and how, um, or how we arrived at this setback, then that can make the comeback more difficult, give us more struggle than what we may anticipate. And so I think the pauses can be sometimes difficult as well because we just don't, set the foundation for the shift in the ignition. So, but I agree with you. Each step can be difficult in its own right.
Right. I mean, and not only does it vary person to person, but for a particular person, it could vary from setback to setback as to which part of the process is going to be the most difficult for us. And that's why it's important for us to remain flexible and pliable in our approach. And I think that's one of the beauties of this framework is that it gives room for flexibility so that we can accommodate whatever situation it is that we're facing.
And I think it's important to let our audience know too, Frankie, that one of the reasons why we started this journey with this podcast and even, the pause, shift, and ignite is because we recognize that, there are many people who have difficulty with the pausing and the shifting and the ignition when it comes to setbacks and comebacks. And so that's one of the reasons why we decided to get into this space this way is to try to shed some light on, you know, on our experiences to try to help other people on their journey.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And, shared experiences are how we grow communally and we can learn from one another.
Absolutely. So for our audience, what about you? I mean, think about the last time you pulled yourself out of something and nobody else saw it, but it mattered. Reflect on that.
Yeah. I mean, it gets into that notion of, who are we really? When we're in a room by ourselves with nothing but our thoughts, who are we? What is our character? I was mentioning it to you earlier, Nuge, when we were talking before, the episode started, but there's a quote and I forget who it is, but it says your character is who you are when nobody else is watching.
Absolutely. I like that very much. Well, that just takes us into our next topic, and we're going to talk about, that comebacks, they aren't usually, or they don't have to be one dramatic moment. We talked about this at the top of the podcast. It's not necessarily a Hollywood style comeback where you have all the lights and, fireworks and what have you, but they can be smaller comebacks that you stack on top of each other and build something bigger. Um, what say you, Frankie, on many comebacks?
Many comebacks are the building blocks of success. In another episode, I think in a previous episode, we talked about, how it's important to break things down into smaller steps because if we can't eat the whole cow in one bite. We've used that analogy before. So these mini comebacks allow us to see progress more readily rather than putting in all this effort, putting in all this effort, putting in all this effort for delayed success down the road because we tried to bite off more than we could chew it in one go. So these small things, these small wins stack up to, produce a large result. You think about the notion of, improvement. If I can just get every day, if I can just get 0.5% better than I was the day before, right? And you think about how what it does is it compounds as you go forward. So if I get 0.5% better every day, by the end of the year, I've had this exponential growth curve because of the compounding interest, so to speak, on the effort that I've put in. Another great visual that I like to think of is, you got an airplane that takes off from Los Angeles going to New York. And if it were to alter its trajectory by, 1 degree or 2 degrees when it leaves LA, that small change in the very beginning would make that plane land in Washington, D.C. rather than landing in New York. So these small things have significant impact down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah, you talk about that shift in the plane's trajectory. It makes me think of when I was traveling for work back sometime, and the weather would change that trajectory of that plane sometimes, where it wouldn't take off, or it would take off and go someplace where you, you weren't expecting it to go. Oh, I don't miss those days. So when we talk about mini comebacks, you know, things that we can, stack upon one another. And, I'm sure there's a lot of different topics, going to the gym, building trust, what have you. There's a mini comeback for me. Our audience doesn't know until now that, I do like snacks. And I know that too many snacks can affect my health journey. And so anytime that I can make a better snack choice or leave that snack alone altogether is a mini comeback for me because I like chocolate. I like dark chocolate. I like light chocolate. I mean, I like chocolate. There's a there's a part of me that blames my mother for that because she loved chocolate and she always had chocolate around. But I love her for that. And so any time that I can either eliminate that unhealthy snack or just eliminate a snack altogether is a mini comeback for me.
Yeah, and those those little small things just give us that momentum. It's like, okay, yeah, I I won over that craving this time, or I won over that situation this time. That gives me momentum going into the other. And not only do these comebacks stack on top of one another to build momentum, but we can also stack a comeback off of something else that's somewhat of an anchor in our life. And I'll give an example to kind of illustrate for me a mini comebacks. Since transitioning jobs, one of the things I've struggled with is getting back into my regular fitness routine. Still find time to get my runs in on a regular basis, but in terms of strength training, things are lacking in a very sad way. So this is actually pretty recent. So I decided I really need to at least get back into the mode of doing some upper body stuff. So I thought about, and I wasn't having much success. So I thought about what do I do that kind of anchors my day? What are the things that I do on a regular basis that I know are going to happen? And one of the things is as soon as I get up in the morning, the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to the coffee maker and I make my cup of coffee without fail.
Guilty.
You know, that is
Guilty.
like, don't talk to me. Don't look at me. Don't even speak my name until I've had my cup of coffee in the morning. Right. It's that habitual for me. So I use that as an anchor because it takes a little bit of time for that cup of coffee to brew. Not much, but enough. So I made an anchor and I actually just started it this week. I started it on Monday. It's like, all right, well, while my cup of coffee is brewing, I'm going to do 10 push-ups right there in the kitchen while my coffee's brewing. So I have this habit, this anchor that I know is going to happen, and I use it to stack a comeback that I'm trying to make. I use it as an anchor to stack that comeback on top of it. And I tell you what, Nude, so far it's worked. I've been doing it every day since Monday, so I'll report back to let you know how it goes. But those comebacks can stack in interesting ways on things that we have as anchor points in our lives too.
Well, I know you didn't mean this as a challenge, Frankie, but I'm gonna take that challenge because I do the same thing in the morning. I get up, I have my coffee first before I do anything else, and so I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna give that a shot. I'm gonna get
Okay.
10 push-ups while my coffee is brewing, and I generally only have one cup during the week. Sometimes on the weekend I might have two, so maybe on the weekend I'll get two sets of 10 if I have that second cup of coffee. But I'm gonna take on that challenge and see how well I can do. So I'll report back when we get together again.
All right. I want to hear about this success because I know that's what it's going to be.
But stacking many comebacks doesn't mean it's easy. Most of the time, the mini comebacks feel lonely because there is no one looking in. I mean, it is an audience of one. Um, So, I just want to sit that with our audience for a minute. When you think about your mini comebacks and you're doing it all alone, um, what are you thinking? How are you feeling? Like, how are you, keeping your as we mentioned earlier, keeping your energy up, keeping that momentum. So just consider that as you're working through your comebacks. So let's talk about the lonely side of rising without recognition. What say you on that topic there, Sir Frankie?
I mean, it can be lonely. If we go back to the things that we were talking about at the top of the conversation and some of the feelings that can be involved with, the decision you make to go it alone, or because we may be embarrassed, or there may be some fear, or maybe it is something that you just have to do on your own. But there's always going to be some feeling there. And for me, the question becomes, why are you doing it? If you're going to go this and you're going to do it on your own, are you doing it for yourself, or are you doing it for somebody else? And I think that's really the first question to ask, because that's going to lead to a lot of it's going to influence a lot of the decisions you make along the way. Because if you're doing it for yourself, you're going to approach it with a totally different mindset than if you were doing this thing for someone else.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think the thing to remember is that um, just because nobody sees it doesn't mean your comeback isn't legendary, right?
Right.
You can still have a legendary comeback just because nobody's looking, right? You're looking. You're that man or that woman in the mirror. You're looking. You know it's a comeback. It can still be legendary. You can still celebrate it. It can still be a big deal, just because nobody's looking. So, um, and you had mentioned that earlier too, Frankie. Like, who are you when nobody's looking? Who are you when nobody's clapping? Who are you when nobody's applauding what you're doing? Right? Who are you during those times?
Yeah. I mean, the analogy that brings to top of mind for me is that, you always say, the tree falling in the woods thing. Hey, if a tree falls in the wood and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? It doesn't matter. The tree fell. So, with our comeback, if nobody's around to see it, is it still a legendary comeback? It doesn't matter. You made the comeback.
That's right. So we talked about how do you hold on to the energy when nobody's watching, and there's a lot of things I guess you can do. You can pray, you can repeat affirmations. One of the affirmations that you can repeat is our tagline: setbacks are temporary, but comebacks are legendary. I mean, I think that's a strong affirmation that you can incorporate into holding that energy for your comeback. What do you think,
Absolutely.
Frankie?
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to mindset. We talked about it in the visualization episode. We have to have, a vision of what success looks like. And that vision can be very pivotal in helping us to maintain our forward momentum, to maintain our drive towards making that comeback, whether it's visible or not. I mean, again, why are you doing it? That's the question that you have to answer. Why are you doing it? And if you understand that why, that means that you've really put in the work in that pause stage of the framework to establish what it is that you're trying to achieve and why it's important to you. And another strong mantra is, I am enough. I am enough.
Absolutely. I like that one a lot because you are enough. And when I say you, I mean you, me, the audience. I mean, we are enough. And to tell ourselves that to the point of believing it, I think is very powerful. So celebrate the micro wins. Definitely celebrate. Use your mantras, journal if that's what you do, um, and share with an accountability partner. We talked about these comebacks, when nobody's looking, but it's nothing wrong with having an accountability partner or having someone to go through the journey with you, somebody that you know, trust, and love, um, that that can really have your back on this comeback journey that you're on. So don't be afraid of that.
Yeah, the accountability partner is such a crucial piece of the puzzle too. If and it's always fortunate to have one. It's not guaranteed that we'll always have an accountability partner. But when you do have one, oh man, that is such a catalyst for your comeback. Somebody that you can confide in, someone that you can be vulnerable with to let them know what you're going through and, more importantly, what you're trying to achieve. And it's really important for that person to be someone who's going to give it to you straight. If you're off course, they'll let you know. If you're not doing what you say you will do, they'll let you know. And at the same time, when you are making that progress, they're going to be your biggest cheerleader. So if you can find an accountability partner, you've truly found a great thing.
Well, I think you're gonna hold me accountable with this whole push up at the coffee maker thing. I want to ask the audience, what is the one silent comeback that you can start today? I've got mine. I'm gonna be doing push ups at the coffee maker. So, what silent comeback can you start? Think about that one.
Absolutely.
All right. So, in terms of what comebacks we're working on right now, I can say for me, Frankie, I mean, outside of the push-ups, because I really am going to work on that. But for me, it's tech, and I know that tech is your background, so you don't really struggle with this much. Um, with everything that is coming out from a technology standpoint, I find myself somewhat intimidated sometimes because there's just so much and it moves so fast. And, you know, uh, coming through the years that I was coming through with tech, it's nothing like it is now. And so I find myself forcing myself to learn different things as it relates to technology so that I don't get totally left behind, and that I can also navigate through life because the tech is here and it's not going away. And so I force myself to come back to the tech on a regular basis so that I can learn something new and not just learn it, but apply it to the point where I feel confident about what I'm doing. So I don't have to get on the phone and say, "Hey, Frankie, tell me about this, external hard drive thing." you know, so tech for me is something that is an ongoing stretch. So anything for you, Frankie?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack with what you brought up there, dude. So, if we go back to what we were talking about at the top of the conversation, the difference between a bounce back and a comeback. The bounce back brings us back to where we were. The true comeback takes us to a totally different place. That implies growth. And what you're talking about is learning. And learning is a lifelong journey. If we stop learning, we stop growing. And if we're not learning, we're not growing, we're not going to make a comeback that takes us to a new place. We're just going to be trapped inside of the same old box, that same old comfort zone, which may feel nice, but it's a prison. We can't grow outside of it. So, what you mentioned with learning, I think is pivotal to the whole process. We have to keep learning and evolving if we want to keep reaching for new things.
All right. The big comebacks grab headlines, right? The big comebacks grab headlines. But the real ones, the ones that really change your life, not that big ones don't, but the ones that really change are the ones you make when nobody's watching. So consider that. Consider the comeback stacking, as we talked about the micro comebacks, and don't be afraid to grow. Um, I think we're at the end here, Frankie. Why don't you tell the people where they can find us and keep keep watching, keep listening.
Absolutely. And, just first and foremost, so thankful for all the folks that are out there listening. This is a journey for us, and it's just great to, have the support of a community behind us as we go down this path. We are available on just about every audio podcast platform out there. We're on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon. You can go to our website. This is psipod.com and click on the episodes link, and it will take you to an interface where you can see all the places where our podcast is available. You can listen to episodes. It's a great place to go. So make sure you go out and subscribe. We're also on social media. at This Is PSI Pod. That's on Instagram. That's on TikTok. We're on Facebook as well. So, follow and like our content out there. And don't forget, we're on YouTube as well. So if you want to see the video of our podcast and our reels and our shorts, we're available on YouTube as well at This Is PSI Pod.
Perfect. Thanks, Frankie. Yes, get out there, like, follow, subscribe. We really appreciate it very much. So until next time, everybody, just remember that setbacks are temporary and comebacks are legendary. And until next time, go out there, be brave, and rise on purpose.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the PSI Effect Podcast. This show doesn't happen without you, and you can connect with us via Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit our website at thisispsipod.com and find us on YouTube and social media at This Is PSI Pod. That's at This Is PSI Pod. Until next time, remember, be brave and rise on purpose.